Hey, my name's Hunter Manning, and in this video I'm going to be briefly describing both my thought process and my research process for my paper. Alright, so first up, one of the most important parts of this paper is the topic. How in the world did I choose my topic? So, originally I was going to do something related to AI, and that's mostly because it's a modern issue. I mean, there's a lot of information on it now, there's plenty of research, and there's plenty of sources, and a lot of people disagree on it, so it probably would be pretty easy to find information that helps me form my own perspective. And honestly, I ended up not going with this because I can't make anything easy on myself for some reason. I decided to go with what I knew the least. And looking back at what we've done so far, I thought the technology readings were probably the hardest ones, more specifically our relationship with technology. So I decided to go with either Blumenberg, Spengler, or Heidegger. And I'll get into a little bit more why I chose Blumenberg, but I hope to get a better grasp on the content, so that's kind of why I chose the technology readings, even though I might be sacrificing my grade if I might have missed something or didn't understand it fully, but we'll see. So continuing on how I actually selected my topic, when I revisited these works, I ended up being torn between Blumenberg and Heidegger, and I have lots of points of agreement with both. However, I do have disagreement points with both, so they both have that in common. But whenever I revisited Blumenberg, I ended up seeing something that I thought he was missing from his. And like I said, I might have missed it, but I didn't see anywhere in his work where he actually provides a solution, which honestly left me with little room to assume anything other than he didn't think there is a solution for it. So that's what I ended up making the basis of my paper, is that Blumenberg almost feels that the Western trajectory is irreversible. And so that's where I had kind of a disagreement with, and so I pulled that thread and went from there and laid that as the foundation for my paper. Okay, so moving on to what I thought was the most difficult part of this entire paper. And when I say difficult, I mean time-consuming. I probably spent the most time finding resources and crafting my research synthesis, more so than I did my paper itself. And to start this, I actually did what I do in my other research. I'm part of a research group at Tech, and we've been working for about 3 semesters. And part of my work in this group is actually doing literature review on certain topics. And what the instructor for this research lab says is to use AI, because it's very helpful at finding relevant authors in the topic of study. Now, maybe not so much about finding like specific papers, but it's very good at finding authors from my experience. However, when I did it for this, it was not so good. I'd type in my thought process and I'd type in what my exact topic was, and it'd give me authors that weren't even remotely related to technology or philosophy for that matter. And so I ended up having to use Google Scholar for this. So I'd go on Google Scholar and I'd type in keywords for this, and that's where I found the majority of my authors. But one thing I thought was pretty interesting was after I did the NACE reading, I went into Citation Machine to do the Chicago Manual of Style citation. And when it comes out, it came out as a Dringson reading the first time I did it. And I went back to it and I couldn't figure out why. But then I ended up exploring Dringson, and it was actually pretty useful. His perspective even shaped my own, and like you see in my paper, I quote him quite a few times. So I thought it was pretty cool that I accidentally stumbled upon one of the main people that I talk about in my paper. So yeah. So one last thing that I thought was pretty difficult about this entire project was anticipating the author's response. So in my case, anticipating Blumenberg's response. And when I first began to try to do this at the end of my paper, I honestly found it pretty hard to figure out what he would say to what I was saying, because he doesn't explicitly say that there's no solution from my understanding of his reading. And so I was kind of confused about how he would go about responding to me. So then I returned to the syllabus to see if there'd be any clarifying information for it. I ended up seeing the note at the end of the instructions for the paper that said AI would be a great resource for this. So I ended up downloading the PDF of the 3 Blumenberg readings we did, and I plugged them into my AI model. And I said, imagine your Bloomberg, and then I gave it my whole spiel about what I thought a good solution for our relationship with technology, about how to reverse it would be. And I said, imagine your Bloomberg, what would your response be to this? And that's kind of how I shaped the end of my paper in anticipating Blumenberg's response. Just kind of had a casual conversation with it. I explained my thought process, and I think it did a decent job. But, overall, this whole project, I thought it was pretty cool. It was probably harder than I thought it was going to be, and there's some points where I'm not sure if I quite hit the mark, but we'll see. But like I said, I thought it was a great experience overall, and I would certainly do it again. Maybe next time on a different topic. Maybe I would do AI next time.